10-year anniversary. Community nurse Tanya Douglas has been part of the crew for almost the entire time.
We really just see almost anything. We were initially set up to be a primary care, so see people for their regular chronic issues and stuff, which we certainly do, but we do see a lot of kind of acute presentations and really any age range.
The mobile clinic can see around 25 patients a day. Often, the weekly visits are the only form of primary care they can get in their community.
It just fills that gap. And in doing so, we try to prevent more severe illness.
The community nurse at Birchwood Health Center says there's not a doctor or nurse practitioner on site. The center is also short 2 nurses, so the mobile health clinic steps up and provides some aid.
It helps me by just not having to send people away from the community.
The retrofitted RV travels to Birdtail every Monday and visits 3 other First Nation communities every week. Chelsea Kemp, CBC News, Birdtail Sioux First Nation.
If you haven't snowmobiled before, this is kind of the top level of snowmobiling.
This Lactabani showroom wouldn't be here if local politicians hadn't set aside their differences and started working together.
It's been beyond overwhelming and incredible.
All right, have a good one. Bye.
The dealership opened in February and says it's done brisk business ever since, but first it had to clear some hurdles.
We're actually on the RM side of Lactabani, on RM land. And that across the street, across the main highway into town, is town.
The issue? The town of Lactabani has water and sewer services. The rural municipality does not, and the business couldn't start up without it.
It put the town and the RM in a place where they had to work together.
The town's revamped water treatment plant opened in 2004 with help from the province. It was also meant to serve the surrounding area. 20 years later, that still hasn't happened. People in the RM have been living with boil water advisories and trucking in water for decades.
There was much less of a collaborative approach in respect to what we need to do to support and strengthen our community. And that's changed recently.
After years of rivalry and arguments over funding, the 2 governments are finally planning to run lines into the RM, bringing people clean water while bringing the town more revenue.
We recognize that, running our water plant at less than 20% capacity is probably not really particularly efficient.
The lack of water not only made life harder, it also stalled growth on both sides of the municipal border.
We need the town needs us.
Both governments say their long-standing disagreements led to stagnation.
There are some perceptions that, yes, there were personality conflicts.
Has that been holding Lactabani back then?
Yes. We've missed a lot of opportunities over the years because we haven't had the water and sewer infrastructure.
This RM councillor spearheaded a shared community development corporation in 2018 and says it fell apart due to differences in vision. Now, the RM and town are proudly partnering to build water lines and attract developers.
It's over the top exciting for me. It's a very, very positive thing for our region, for us to be moving in this direction. And it's long overdue.
The new alliance is already reaping rewards at Lake Life Power Sports.
Absolutely. We believe in the town, and we think that any further investment in it, there needs to be more.
The councils hope to get more pipes in the ground next year. Emily Brass, CBC News, Lactabani, Manitoba.
That's awesome.
A moment of freedom, but the exoneration of Clarence Woodhouse, Alan Woodhouse, and Brian Anderson has raised a crucial question. Who killed Ting Fong Chan? He was a chef at Winnipeg's Beachcomber restaurant in 1973 and a father of 2. Lawyer James Lockyer advocates for the wrongfully convicted with Innocence Canada. He says it can be difficult to find the real killer after so long.
To say the trail is cold is it doesn't quite get to it.
He points to the case of David Milgaard. He was exonerated after DNA evidence identified the true culprit nearly 30 years later.
James Lockyer thinks it's unlikely there's DNA evidence in Chan's murder, but he says police do have something else. the names of other people identified as suspects at the time.
Because any other suspects that they identified back in 1973, they discounted because they had decided who had done the crime.
Retired Detective Andrew Mikołajewski saw that when he reviewed the 1981 killing of 16-year-old Barbara Stoppel, after Thomas Sofino was wrongfully convicted. There were missing notes and even evidence.
And that may be some of the disappointment that investigators in this case find.
It's been over 50 years since Chan was killed, so whoever did it could be dead. Lockyer says it's still worth trying to find who's responsible.
There's a societal interest in it too. And there's nothing Brian Anderson, Alan Woodhouse, and Clarence Woodhouse would like more.
Lockyer says Chan's family deserves to know too. Winnipeg police are reviewing the case but declined to comment. Caitlin Gowerluck, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Andrew Marquis is best known as a developer of the Parker lands in Winnipeg. Between 2020 and 2023, he worked as a consultant and advisor for Peguis First Nation, working on a debt repayment plan, consulting on housing shortages related to flooding, and using treaty land entitlement funds to purchase real estate assets. In a statement of claim filed on September 27th, Peguis alleges Marquis, companies he controls, and a company owned by his wife failed to act in the best interests of the band and benefited financially from breaches of duty. In the claim, Peguis alleges Marquis has consistently misused his power and discretion as a fiduciary to enrich himself to the detriment of Peguis. According to the claim, Marquis had the Peguis First Nation Real Estate Trust purchase this former golf course in East St. Paul because he was interested in developing it into housing, according to the claim. Peguis claims Marquis directed the real estate trust to agree to a $5.5 million loan from a company owned by Marquis's wife. That loan now has an interest rate of 9.2%, according to the claim. Peguis also claims Marquis directed the real estate trust to buy and sell this vacant land along Wellington Crescent in Winnipeg. According to the claim, the province sold this land to Peguis on the basis it would be added to its reserve lands. Peguis claims a subsequent sale to a private developer breached the terms of the purchase and the treaty land entitlement agreement. In the claim, Peguis alleges Marquis had the ability to unilaterally exercise his power and discretion in a manner that affected Peguis's legal, economic, and practical interests. Peguis was vulnerable to and at the mercy of Marquis's exercises of discretion and power. In a statement, Marquis called the claim baseless, without merit, and legally flawed. The notion that I, or anyone else for that matter, had total control of all of Peguis's financial, legal, and other matters is pure fiction. Marquis called the claim an attempt by Peguis to distract from its inability to resolve a $172 million lawsuit from a receiver for a former lender and a federal court challenge of its 2023 election launched by former Chief Glenn Hudson against current Chief Stan Bird. None of the allegations made by Peguis have been proven in court. No statement of defense has been filed. Marquis says he will immediately move towards striking the claims. Bart Lekivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, look what you found. The local CBC News and weather you crave all day for free. Your community on your connected TV. Welcome to CBC News Manitoba.
When a call comes in for a fire at a vacant building or house, part of the challenge is the unknown. Fire Captain Raj Sharma works at number 6 station on Redwood Avenue.
Because it's vacant does not mean it is empty. There might be people in there. There might be people using it as shelter. There might be people using it as a place to do drugs. And obviously someone will generally break into it even if they're just going to light it on fire. So we still have to treat it as if there's a life hazard involved.
CBC spent time with the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service to better understand the work of the city's first responders. Sharma says his station is one of the busiest in the city. That includes responding to fires at vacant houses and buildings. Numbers from the city show in the first 6 months of this year, there were 114 vacant property fires in Winnipeg, a total of 156 last year. Fighting them has risks.
We can't trust the structure itself. So a lot of these houses are in such disrepair. There's potential for collapse. There's potential that the floors may be compromised, that there's a lot of inherent dangers for us. And especially when they've had multiple fires in them, they become even more dangerous for us to enter.
The city started billing vacant building owners for firefighting costs last year, a move to try to get owners to take steps to reduce fires. But a city report says fees haven't reduced vacant building fires, and in some cases have discouraged building renovations, potentially leading to repeat fires. Last week, City Council approved lower fees. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And this is the one that's the issue, and you're using that one for reference. Yeah. Okay. This is my 10th year teaching at the Louisville Arts and Technology Center, and I went into industry. I did complete my Red Seal before going into education and getting my voc ed to teach. But it's all mushrooms, so it's not going to pull through. We still have a majority of male students, but we have more and more female students enrolling and actually pursuing it as a career afterward, which is really encouraging. I've been out of the field for a while. I did start my apprenticeship journey over 20 years ago. So a lot has changed. It definitely required some resiliency and definitely there was some adversity to overcome.
When I got accepted to come into ATC, I had no idea that there was going to be a woman teacher, but when I did find out, it did feel great because knowing that there was going to be somebody else there that understands what it's like being a woman in the industry.
There's been a really positive change in industry and it's becoming more mainstream, more accepting to see females in those roles. It's important just to have representation for any marginalized group, but especially having women in trades, I think that's just opening up doors for more talent. You can get just a bolt kit for that flange. I've never had anyone guess my profession or my career. So yeah, there's definitely students will come in and maybe they weren't expecting maybe what they get. But it's only a matter of a really short time before you build a rapport with students. You know what you did?
What?
Really well on your tests.
Really?
Yes. They start to see that, hey, you're an expert in your field. And so you can quickly gain some respect. I think it's really important that we start to shift our focus from maybe what we expect people to look like in certain professions and maybe shift the focus more to people's abilities and their skill sets.
Yeah!
There you go, man. Go for it. What I try to do is just inspire all my students. Success! The ball joint's now officially out of the knuckle.
Yeah!
Whether they're coming from a marginalized group or whether they're male, female. What I see is students really just benefit from seeing success stories and seeing diversity. And I think that hopefully, that all students are taking something from that.
She's helped me so much to learn and to be a successful mechanic, and for that, she's a great educator. Not any teacher can do that and can teach anyone. It takes a truly great educator to teach someone the right way, even when they struggle.
I feel so privileged to be teaching automotive, but it's exceptionally special just being a woman and being in my position to deliver that. It's just that much more impactful, I hope, and just helping to change that sort of idea of what a particular profession looks like. Full resistance. Nice.
Just wondering.
Okay.
Thank you.
Debbie Ross has been living in this hotel room for months.
This is it.
With just a few cherished possessions, like her husband's ashes and her cats. But the rest of her belongings, such as her bed and other furniture, is still here at Birchwood Terrace, unused until Ross and her fellow tenants get the green light to move back in.
And if people think that we are having a good time in here, you've got to give your head a shake. I'm not milking the system. I just cannot afford to go and move my stuff out.
Tenants were forced to vacate with just 8 hours' notice after a serious structural issue was found in the steel columns of the St. James Building's parkade.
No one from Birchwood Terrace will end up on the streets.
In May, the NDP government announced the province will cover the housing for any resident that's been displaced, and they haven't stopped paying since.
We asked the province how much money they've spent so far and how many people are still living in hotels. They got back to us and said they didn't know. The caretaker of the building told the tenants about 60 people are going to move back in. That means this could end up costing the government over $1 million when you look at the length of time that people have been staying in the hotels, plus the cost of the hotel.
It could take years.
These tenants say it's time the owner of the building, Ladco Company, be held accountable.
They should take some responsibility for neglect. When you are owning a building, you should keep it up to standard. And they certainly haven't done that.
And that Ladco should be paying their hotel bill.
Honest to God, they should be paying the price for us. It should not be the city or the province.
Ladco declined a request for comment. They sent a notice to tenants earlier this month saying they hope some people can move back in mid-October, but they will have to pass the city's inspections before that happens. Kristen Annabelle, CBC News, Winnipeg.
In a bail hearing for Chad Cabez, Crown Attorney Sean Sass alleges that Cabez and his girlfriend Irene Lima were the owners and operators of a website on the dark web called Goddess May Barefoot Premium Crush. Sass says the two made videos of animals, specifically cats and kittens, being crushed by Lima using her feet, then sold for profit. These are not quick kills, as the timestamps seem to indicate. Some of these videos are 5 minutes long. They're staged, premeditated torturings that result in the death of very vulnerable animals. In August, the animal protection officer got an anonymous tip from someone on the dark web. The tipster discovered the Barefoot Crush site and believed the couple involved were from Winnipeg. Winnipeg police started investigating and found a Reddit account called Fit Foot Lover, which they believed belonged to Cabez. On the Reddit page, Cabez talks about Lima's feet and makes references to his dark website. For anyone who's following my girlfriend's crush adventures, please DM me on how to find her newly established group elsewhere. Police say the anonymous source conversed with Cabez on Reddit and got instructions on where to find the videos and how to pay. The main page of the dark website reads, "This is a place to exchange barefoot hard crush. Previews of May's work will be posted and her content will be available for purchase. Each member will be required to provide one barefoot hard crush video prior to entry. DM for details." Sass describes the posts almost like commercials. When discussing the website, he says, "It's an extremely graphic image that appears to be of a bare foot on top of some animal. It's unrecognizable." Police executed a search warrant on October 9th and arrested Cabez and Lima for various cruelty offenses. Cabez was released on bail with conditions. His defense lawyer, Ethan Pollock, says, "This is essentially a risk assessment in us determining whether or not Mr. Cabez can be released back into the community on conditions. It's the position of defense counsel that my client can be." Lima was in court Thursday, but the case was remanded to a later date. Cabez is scheduled to return to court November 5th. None of the charges have been proven in court. Mike Arsenault, CBC News, Winnipeg. Winnipeg police respond to a variety of calls, but the ones about mental health are becoming the focus. The Manitoba government is reviewing the Mental Health Act.
We've heard from police that sometimes they don't need to be called in, and we know that police are stretched.
The goal is to take some of the onus away from police and create more non-police options. Minister Bernadette Smith says the Mental Health Act hasn't been reviewed in 25 years, and they're consulting with experts about potential changes. The health liaison for Winnipeg Police Service, Inspector Helen Peters, says it supports the move. Peters says WPS received 234 Mental Health Act forms from May to August, which puts onus on police to respond to mental health calls.
The police officer is the only person with the authority then to detain a person involuntarily by way of a form that has been issued by a judge or a justice of the peace.
Peters says changes to the act could allow police to share the workload with people trained for mental health calls so police can focus on crime and investigations.
One response does not meet the need, and instead of looking to remove responses, what we will hope for is that addition of different types of responses to meet different needs.
The Coalitions of Families Affected by Police Violence is a group looking for change in the system. It's advocated for the family of James Woods, who died in January after being restrained by police. Megan Daniel says Toronto rolled out a crisis team pilot project with no police involved.
They diverted 78% of the calls received from 911 with no police involvement. And so I think that that's an enormous success.
The province says the review on the Mental Health Act is going to take some time, but didn't give specifics on how it will work. Mike Arsenault, CBC News, Winnipeg.
For the past 3 months, Margaret Drawson has had to learn to live without her husband of 62 years by her side.
There's one of our 50th wedding anniversary and one of our...
Gordon Drawson's health started to deteriorate 3 years ago, and until recently, she managed to look after him at home. Gordon was a Winnipeg firefighter for decades and retired in 1995 as a district chief. In August, he started having mobility issues and ended up in hospital waiting to get into a nursing home. It took 3 months for a bed to become available.
It's very difficult.
And even though it was beyond the Drawsons' control, the province charged them $101 a day, the maximum amount allowed.
I think the mistake they're making, or the problem, is when you start to pay at the hospital, you pay the same as you pay at the nursing home, and there is nothing going on there. At least at the nursing home, there's activities.
Margaret Drawson is 83. Every day she drove 20 minutes to visit her husband in Peguis. She says he spent his time in bed, so she would wheel him to the common room for a change of scenery. That's the extent of the activity he got in hospital. And yet, she was billed $2,600 for his stay. And she's one of the lucky ones. There are some Manitobans waiting 6 months or longer for a care home bed.
There are about 341 Manitobans who are currently in hospital waiting for a bed to open up in a nursing home. Once the province determines a person needs to be in a personal care home, it begins charging people in hospital as if they're already in the care home, even if there isn't a bed available for them.
In the past 3 years, Manitobans have paid more than $15 million in residential fees while waiting to be transferred from hospital to a care home bed. That's according to figures obtained by CBC News through Freedom of Information requests. The problem is particularly bad in rural Manitoba. The data shows people living in rural communities were charged over $13 million compared to $1.8 million billed to Winnipeg patients. Dr. Michel Bruno is a family doctor in Lac de Bonnie. He says it's unfair to charge seniors for taking up space in hospital when they have no other choice.
To me, it's so wrong on so many different levels. In the nursing home, when patients get charged for the care there, they actually get a lot of programming. They get a recreational person who just gives them more enrichment and fulfillment in their life in the nursing home. They don't get that in hospital.
He says it's not uncommon to find half the patients of a 20-bed rural hospital are waiting for long-term care.
If you're in hospital...
Laura Tamblin-Watts is the CEO of the seniors advocacy organization CanAge. She says this practice is happening across Canada.
Nobody stays in hospital for fun. You are only in hospital because you are desperately needing health care. And nobody there wants to take up a bed that somebody needs for an acute care like a heart attack or a broken leg. What we see here is the fault of a system being levied on individual vulnerable people.
Under the Canada Health Act, hospitals are allowed to charge for accommodation and living assistance services if a person is no longer receiving active medical care and is awaiting transfer to long-term care. Manitoba's health minister understands people's frustrations, but wouldn't commit to changing the government's policy. Instead, they say the province is committed to opening more care home beds and improving health care.
Folks who are in hospitals, I want to be really clear, are receiving care. You know, folks on the front lines are doing their very best to make sure that they're able to meet folks' needs, making sure that they're able to remain stable. I know that many folks across our healthcare system want to be able to provide more care.
Last week, Gordon Drawson finally got into the Lac de Bonnie personal care home. His wife Margaret feels like she's won the lottery. It's only been a few days and already she's seen a big difference in him. Margaret was beginning to worry how she would make the drive to Peguis in the winter. Now she doesn't have to, and she's grateful for that. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Lac de Bonnie.
Have you ever noticed police officers at Superstore? Data obtained by CBC News shows Loblaw spends about $200,000 a month on them. The company says it's to deter thieves and protect staff and customers. Retail crime is on the rise in Winnipeg, but not everyone can afford to hire police to work in their stores.
Or do you want the paste?
Sarah and Renee Esperanza have run El Izalco Market for 24 years.
You want pupusas?
The Latin American store is in the heart of the West End, and that's come with a lot of challenges.
Very much every day we have someone that comes, can you help me? Some people, they ask, can you help me with a glass of water or bottle of water or juice, whatever? Some people, they just come and snatch the bags, packages and run.
She says someone steals from her store every single day, totaling hundreds of dollars in losses a week. It's not enough to make an insurance claim, but is big enough to have an impact on her small business. One time, a guy even pulled a knife on her and demanded she open the till, but she didn't have much in it.
It's 11 o'clock. How much money I could have in cash. So he put away the knife, he grabbed the drink, and he walked out. And then he tells me, you're such a cool lady.
Since then, she's taken steps to protect herself, which she didn't want to share publicly for safety reasons. Data obtained by CBC News through Freedom of Information shows since January 2019, Winnipeg police have worked over 163,000 hours of overtime for the private sector, costing over $20 million. Over 43% of those hours were officers working at Superstore locations. It's through a program called Special Duty, which allows off-duty police to take on overtime shifts. They work security for Winnipeg Jets games, escort trucking and construction companies moving heavy equipment, or work in retail outlets to deter theft. Superstore says it's worked to keep customers, employees, and stores safe. It wouldn't say if the cost of officers is passed on to shoppers. Walmart is the second biggest retail client behind Loblaw. They started using special duty officers at their Winnipeg stores in 2022 and is now spending an average of $52,000 each month. Superintendent Dave Delal says the demand for officers has grown.
Every year seems to be a record number of people trying to hire police, such that we really have to take a look, just like voluntary overtime, we have to take a look at whether we're causing officer burnout.
Winnipeg police say reported incidents of retail theft have increased by 46% in 2024 compared to last year. And 2023 had the highest volume of occurrences in the past 10 years.
They're going in brazenly. They're not worried about being caught. They're targeting specific items. In 2019, it was liquor. Now it's translated into our over retail business community.
Inspector Jennifer McKinnon says the thieves are either trading those goods for drugs or firearms or selling them online through social media marketplaces. The Retail Council of Canada says these types of thefts are costing businesses up to $200 million a year and would like to see the courts cracking down on repeat offenders.
Those organized criminals that are going in with an intended shopping list of items to steal that are highly convertible to cash on a resale market, those are the ones we're concerned about. Those are the tens of thousands of dollars that can maybe leave an electronics store, a grocery store, a home improvement store every week.
The province partnered with police to pilot an anti-theft initiative that placed dedicated officers at retail hotspots in the West End, Osborne Village, and downtown areas. That program ends in October, and since the officers are all on overtime, there's concern it's not sustainable long-term. Justice Minister Matt Weave says the government is looking at other possible solutions.
How can we engage security, private security, to be properly trained and maybe fill some of these gaps that we've seen that have been created by underfunding to law enforcement.
Esperanza has seen a difference since officers began patrolling the West End, and she'd like to see them stay. Caroline Bargoot, CBC News, Winnipeg.
For a time, walking was something Christian Swan could only dream about. The 46-year-old has diabetes. His ankle and foot were amputated more than 2 years ago after an infection.
I was dreaming I was walking. And if that sounds crazy, that's how it happened for me. I dreamt I was walking, and eventually I got to the stage where I started walking.
Swan learned to walk again with the help of a prosthetic leg. His amputation, likely one of the cases in a recent report. The Canadian Institute for Health Information found between 2020 and 2023, Manitoba saw more than double the national average of diabetes-associated leg amputations. It says Manitoba also saw more ankle and below amputations. Swan was on a trip when a foot wound developed. He visited hospital and was cleared to drive home. He doesn't know if it was the long drive back to Winnipeg or wait in hospital here that infection set in.
The toe started turning black, like it was crazy. It was just like you knew that something was going on, and then they broke the news to me.
You'll see that this toe is gone.
Dr. John Emble works with Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre Limb Preservation Program. He says people with diabetes are at high risk for foot wounds and infections. He says the program sees upwards of 3,000 Manitoba patients a year. Almost all have diabetes.
And they're with us as long as it takes, and then we continue to follow people for life.
He says early detection and early intervention are key in trying to reduce the number of amputations.
If you can prevent end-stage complications, such as lack of sensation in the feet and suboptimal blood supply to the feet, you can prevent many of those complications, and you can prevent the amputations.
The hospital had done their scans.
Darlene Tunney lost toes on her right foot. Now she's learning to live with an amputation below her left knee. Complications came after she went into hospital with pneumonia last November.
My left leg was my good leg. So it was a surprise to find that it had gone black and needed amputation, because I tried to check pretty daily my feet after losing my toe.
She says losing her independence and relying on others, like home care, is difficult. She cautions people to take diabetes seriously.
You can't play around with this disease. It will kill you.
She'd like to see more places like Youville Diabetes Center where people can see a nutritionist, a counselor, or nurse all under one roof. Swan says he didn't know enough.
People have reached out to me, asked questions, and then the next thing you know, they're in the hospital and they're getting treated for a similar situation.
Now he shares his story to help others. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A Winnipeg man is speaking out after he says he was attacked with a machete earlier this month. Ariel Martez says he was taking the bus home after a night shift at the hotel where he works. He says when he got off the bus, two people asked him for the time around midnight near Rock Street and Sheraton Ave. He says a short time later, one of the men came at him with a gun. He says they asked him to hand over his belongings, and he did hand over his AirPods and his phone. He says one of the men assaulted him with a machete, hitting his leg and left arm. The men eventually took off, leaving him to get home about 1 kilometer away on his own. When he made it, he said his family called 911 and he was taken to hospital.
It's just unfair. I go to work, I do my stuff, I do nothing wrong, and then people go in the street. I came from Brazil to the city. It's just a shame that the city that once I thought it was safe, and once I thought it was a refuge for me and my family, that we could escape from the violence in Brazil. It's just a shame that we need to suffer this in Canada, Winnipeg.
He says while doctors believe he will make a recovery, it will take time. Winnipeg police say they are investigating. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
It was January 19th, 2022, that a family of 4 from India was found frozen in a Manitoba field. Jagdish Patel, his wife Vaishali, their 11-year-old daughter Vahanya, and 3-year-old son Dharmik were trying to walk across the Canada-US border in frigid temperatures. A jury trial for 2 men indicted on several counts related to human trafficking in the case is set for November 18th in a Minnesota courthouse. A trial brief filed Monday in the U.S. maps out the evidence attorneys plan to introduce in court. The documents include messages between the two accused, Harsh Kumar Patel and Steve Shand, that show they were aware of the dangers of the cold that day, and on previous occasions when it's alleged they orchestrated crossings for others hoping to make it to the U.S. In one exchange, the court documents say the night before the Patel family was found, Shand forwarded the other accused a screenshot of a blizzard warning he received, saying, "Make sure everyone is dressed for the blizzard conditions, please." It also says he sent videos of the blizzard conditions. Court documents allege that between December 2021 and January 19, 2022, dozens of people were smuggled across the Canada-US border in a large human smuggling operation. The documents say Patel and Shand were involved in cases of people crossing from Manitoba to Minnesota. In the court documents, it's alleged that Patel worked with people in Canada on things like location and dates, then hired Shand to pick up the migrants on the U.S. side of the border and bring them to Chicago. The two have pleaded not guilty. The trial is expected to last 5 days. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
This is the house where 39-year-old Sukhtal Singh Gill was killed last September in northwest Winnipeg, a case now tied to the tensions between Canada and India. A year later, it still concerns area resident Inderjeet Singh Brar.
We were very concerned about that. It was like early morning when this happened, and the kids were going to the school at the time. And I don't want this thing to happen in this community.
The RCMP alleged Monday agents of the Indian government may have played a role in widespread acts of violence in Canada. And sources tell CBC News police are actively investigating whether Gill's homicide is connected to 3 men accused in the high-profile shooting death in June 2023 of Sikh separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey. Nijjar's killing fractured the relationship between Canada and India. Parmjeet Gill with the Sikh Society of Manitoba says the tension between the two countries is weighing on some members of the Sikh community.
Yeah, we have concern all over. I talked to my colleagues too, and we want to be a peaceful, and then all the relationship be established and peaceful in a good faith.
Tensions flared last year when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced in the House of Commons evidence linking Indian agents to the killing of Nijjar. Winnipegger Vikram Singh is worried about the diplomatic feud.
Whenever there is a conflict between the countries, we say that the issues should be resolved by diplomacy. But see now, India and Canada both are they're terminating the diplomats. So I don't know how they're gonna fix the problem.
Brar worries those tensions could have a potential impact on some people now living here who require visas to travel back to India.
The thing is, when we go back to the India, so in the airports, then we have to get more investigated.
He hopes investigators can get to the bottom of what happened in his neighborhood. Winnipeg police say they're still investigating the Gill homicide. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The search for the remains of 2 First Nations women at a Winnipeg area landfill will soon get underway. The province says excavators have started moving material at the Prairie Green landfill in the hopes of bringing home Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron. And a warning, this story contains details some viewers may find distressing. CBC's Josh Crabb is in the newsroom with more details now. Josh.
Excavation of the top layers of landfill material has begun. Construction of a facility where material will be searched by hand is underway, and the interview process to hire searchers is happening too. Heavy machinery could be seen in the distance moving landfill material from an area about the size of 4 football fields. Family members of the women and reporters got a look at the site as Premier Wab Kinew, the Assembly of Manitoba chiefs and provincial officials gave an update. Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron and 2 other women, Rebecca Contois and Mushkade Bishake Ekwe-Ibon, were murdered by serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky, who's serving 4 concurrent life sentences. Harris's and Myron's remains are believed to be in the landfill. Cambria Harris says her family is grateful. The humanitarian search is starting more than 2 years after her mother Morgan was killed.
And these searchers are tasked with a
a very real task, and that's hopefully providing closure to our grief of our loved ones. It's been 2 years now that my mom's been laying in a landfill, as well as Mercedes Myron, and that's 2 years too long, and I'm excited to finally be getting this on the way.
This asphalt pad and concrete blocks will form the foundation for a covered and heated search facility. Work is underway to hire 24 search technicians to make up 2 teams to go through the excavated material. New hydro lines, new roads, and a cultural space for families have also been added to the landfill. The top layer of landfill material above the targeted search zone being moved right now is about 4 meters deep. Amna Mackin is an assistant deputy minister and project management lead for the landfill search. Mackin says that work began last week.
And these materials are being set aside in a dedicated area of an adjacent cell and will be temporarily covered for possible searching at a later date.
So Josh, we learned a bit more about what this next stage will look like. Can you break that down for us?
Yes, the next stage of the search will involve searching 3 meters deeper, which is where the remains of Mercedes Myron and Morgan Harris are believed to be. Mackin says that phase could start in early December. If their remains aren't where experts believe they are, an additional 3 meters could be excavated, and a search of the top 4 meters of landfill material that is currently being removed right now could also take place. Premier Wab Kinew had a message for the women's families.
And I hope that as you see the progress that's been brought here today, that it brings you some measure of healing.
Families and leaders also acknowledged the late Kathy Merrick, the former Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, who fought hard for this search.
Yeah, we're gonna throw a plot.
Marking out a 4-meter circumference, Farron Sharp is counting how many jack pine seedlings are still thriving, years after being planted in the ashes of a defunct forest. That is part of a survival assessment undertaken in the fall to track the progress in reforesting Manitoba's Interlake along Highway 6 and south of Grand Rapids.
Fully grown forest used to be here, and then it became a dead forest from the pine budworm. And then once it was salvaged, it became total burn ground. So all of this land was completely black in 2021.
Dead trunks surround Devil's Lake, their charred roots hidden under the tall grass, high and dry soil, ideal for a new generation of trees to grow.
When you're planting by stumps, there's going to be a breakdown of what's underneath the ground there, and it also means if a tree grew there once, it's going to grow there again.
Blue Green Planet Project began planting seedlings in the spring of 2022. Now from 7 Manitoba First Nations.
The biggest part of that is the reconciliation.
Floyd North is a liaison for the communities. He says while reforestation projects often take place on their land, for many First Nations, becoming a part of the forest industry has been a long time coming.
We're trying to create businesses in the treaty communities and try and get them into the game.
2.8 million seedlings have been planted in over 1,300 hectares so far.
The survival rate on the trees they planted is 95%, which is exceptional.
The forest was part of over 1 million hectares of land, which burned down in Manitoba in 2021. That year saw hundreds of wildfires, one of the worst seasons in the last decade. The goal now is to plant 20 million trees in the region by 2030.
If we can reestablish forest and help capture some of that carbon and help reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, hopefully we'll be able to help slow the spread of wildfire, but also encourage other people to take on projects like this.
But if the flames tear through Devil's Lake once again, cones from the new black spruce and jack pines should be able to regenerate the forest.
This project is part of a larger push by the federal government to restore Canada's canopy. They want to plant 2 billion trees by 2031 in hopes rehabilitating forests like this will help ease climate change. Santiago Arias, CBC News, Devil's Lake, Manitoba.
When an elderly woman picked up the phone back in 2022, she thought it was her grandson on the other end. He was in trouble and asking for money because he'd been arrested. She went to the bank and took out $9,000 in $100 bills. She took the bills back to her house, then handed them over to a woman who showed up at her door. Turns out it wasn't her grandson on the phone, and the grandmother wasn't the only one being targeted. In a Winnipeg court this week, the Ontario woman who picked up the cash from the grandmother was sentenced to a year of house arrest. Gabrielle Paradis was what prosecutors called a money mule in a scheme where 9 elderly people lost nearly $90,000. The victims got most of that cash back, but the judge talked about how they still all live with the shock of it. The judge said, "The emotional impact, the feeling perhaps of embarrassment of falling for this sort of scam, and having their confidence shaken and their family's confidence shaken are implications that go well beyond just the money." Another Ontario woman charged in the same scheme got 18 months of house arrest earlier this year. But court heard we still don't know who is behind the scam. Caitlin Gowerluck, CBC News, Winnipeg.
In front of her family and supporters, Madison Baluk pleaded guilty to sexual assault and luring. The now 29-year-old was initially charged with 15 offenses in connection to incidents that happened between 2019 and 2021 when she was a hockey coach. In an agreed statement of facts, a provincial court heard how Baluk, who was 24 at the time, gradually developed a sexual relationship with a 15-year-old girl. The girl was a player on Baluk's under-18 hockey team. Court heard how, despite being warned about inappropriate behavior with players, Baluk initiated conversations with the victim through private social media messages. Over time, their relationship escalated into kissing and sexual contact on many occasions. It included Baluk taking sexually explicit pictures and videos of and with the girl. Court heard how the victim's academics, friendships, and mental health deteriorated during their relationship, which continued after Baluk was no longer her coach. Police began investigating the case in October of last year after the victim detailed the abuse in a social media video. Baluk remains out on bail until her sentencing. A date for that hasn't yet been set. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Laura Chase rents a unit in a fourplex house built in the 1960s, at a time when asbestos was widely used in a range of building materials.
The water damage on the ceiling had been right about there.
In the past 2 years, the Residential Tenancies Branch ordered her landlord to make various repairs, such as replacing drywall that had water damage, fixing the bathtub faucet, and replacing windows. In 2023, the property manager sent a representative to get samples for asbestos testing. The results came back negative in drywall plaster in the bedrooms and beside the kitchen window, and negative in fiberglass insulation.
Based upon the first tests that were done, that were apparently negative, they went ahead and they started doing work.
Chase became suspicious about the test results, so she hired a testing company. One of the samples came back positive for asbestos in the drywall joint compound on the bathroom ceiling. She later got testing done for the drywall joint compound in the bedroom, and it was also positive for asbestos.
So after the windows were replaced and before the bathroom was renovated, I did the testing, and I found the results were indeed positive. And that was alarming because 3 windows had been replaced without any precautions.
Asbestos is a carcinogenic material, and if it becomes airborne and is inhaled, it can cause fatal illnesses such as mesothelioma and asbestosis. Canada has banned the use of asbestos-containing materials, but they were widely used in construction materials until about 1990. This year, British Columbia became Canada's first province to have a law that requires licensing of employers doing asbestos abatement work and certification of workers who do the job, including sampling and testing. Laura Chase says Manitoba should do the same.
Clearly, the current situation is unsafe. It was unsafe in my case, and the fact that there's so little accountability because there is no license. A person can't lose a license that they don't have in the first place. So how can there be any kind of accountability in a system like this?
The province says that's being evaluated in a review of the Workplace Safety and Health Act, with recommendations expected in early 2025. CBC News contacted the property manager for Chase's house about the asbestos test results, but a spokesperson declined to discuss the case. When Chase decided to get her own asbestos testing done rather than rely on the property managers, she contacted Winnipeg firm J&D Environmental to get the samples for testing.
What you're showing us here is actually an incredibly common issue.
Danielle Kolba is founder and president of J&D Environmental, as well as Duracan Laboratory Group. He has about 20 years' experience in asbestos work and consulting.
You get false negatives quite often on sites, and this is where you want competent people or consulting firms that actually know how to collect the sample, know where those samples should be collected from, and get you the most authentic data possible to determine if there's asbestos in it.
Kolba says it's important to make sure the sample collection for asbestos testing is always done by an independent third-party company rather than by the contractor who will be doing the renovation work. Veralyn Kubanek, CBC News, Winnipeg.
October is Women's History Month, a time to honor and celebrate notable women and their achievements. Throughout this month, we've been introducing you to women in Manitoba who are breaking barriers. Well, tonight we want to highlight the work of Dr. Annie Drapeau, a pediatric neurosurgeon at HSC Children's Hospital. Brittany spoke with her last week.
Dr. Drapeau, you have had such a profound impact on the lives of young children and their families with the work that you do. And as the first female neurosurgeon in the province, what made you want to get into this career?
It's a really good question. I think it was mainly the mentors that I met along the way. I was never around doctors or definitely not neurosurgeons growing up, but I was interested in sciences and was pretty good at math and all those things. So gave medicine a shot. And then I met really fantastic neurosurgeons where I was doing my med school, and they encouraged me to follow this path. And every step of the way has been because of different mentors along the way. And that's the reason that I'm here now today in Manitoba.
So you've introduced minimally invasive head and facial surgeries, and these can mean less scarring and really reduced complications for kids that you treat. So can you tell us about the impact these surgeries have and what it really means for patients?
Absolutely. I learned these techniques during my specialty training in Columbus, Ohio, from other fantastic mentors. And then when I joined the group here, the fantastic team here was already doing great work on children with craniofacial differences. It's a combination of neurosurgeons and plastic surgeons who work together. But I helped to introduce this minimally invasive technique to be used a little bit more here. That requires mainly just one small scar where we remove a strip of bone to unlock and unfuse these skulls that have been abnormally fused at birth. And it's a much shorter surgery, a lot less blood loss during these surgeries, and much better tolerated for the patients afterwards. For example, they actually only stay in the hospital overnight, and then they get to go home the next day. They don't need to be in the intensive care unit anymore, and they rarely need blood transfusions. And, the impact that it has is that, again, it's much easier to handle for the patient, the family, and even our nursing staff and just the whole hospital team. The other day, actually, one of the nurses came up to me and was like, "Oh my gosh, Dr. Drapeau, this is amazing how quickly and well these patients do after this minimally invasive surgery." And I think that's the best compliment that you can get, to see the impact across the entire board, really.
It really is such amazing work that you do, because so often families are seeing you because they're going through something that's really difficult. So it has to be a really incredible feeling to see the work that you do literally changing people's lives in real time. Talk about the impact that you feel after helping people.
It's a very privileged position to be in to, as you say, help these people through a really difficult time. And I, see that as important as much as the surgery of being, a calm listening ear and a clear communicator to explain what will be, the surgery and what to expect after surgery. But I think, where do I see that impact, truly is when I see the kids grow, go to school and, become their own little person. For example, I actually have a family from the institution where I worked before in Ohio, and they still send me photos. We, they have my, phone number, and, we exchange photos of, the most recent was their daughter going to a Taylor Swift concert. And, to see that I play that role in their life and that they'll still remember me, many years later, and that she's doing, that well, that she can go and enjoy herself and feel confident, at a fun event like a Taylor Swift concert. I think there's no greater feeling or accomplishment than that.
While I have you here, you also do research. Why is it important to you to keep working towards more advances and changes in your field?
Yeah, I think, we always have to look towards the future and always have to find ways to do better. We need to understand more about the conditions that we treat. My areas of interest are often actually maybe less scientific or, less mathematical or statistical, but more about, what is actually important to these families or to patients, and kind of thinking a little bit more, what we call patient-centered outcomes. So things like, are they satisfied with the results? How stressful was it to go through surgery and all of the appointments? How can we improve that entire process? And, how are they doing in school? Are they happy with their appearances, even though they still have, potentially some residual craniofacial differences? So, I think there's that aspect of trying to really see what's important for patients and their families, and doing better over time based on, the priorities that they set for us. And then my other areas of interest are things like quality improvement and safety, and again, learning from what we've done in the past to try to continue and do better, and to really, as a surgeon, be at the core of trying to find solutions and understanding how we function, why were there mistakes, why were there complications, why wasn't the process as efficient as it should be, and where can we improve? And so I think if we stay in the past, we'll never get better, and we have to look to the future and keep, finding ways to do better.
Dr. Drapeau, thank you so much. You are one of our superstars this month, and we appreciate all of the work that you do.
Well, thank you very much. And I can't do it alone, so it's a team effort. And I'm just happy to be here in Manitoba and to share, what we do.
Get down there! Emily Beauregard's wish for her 18th birthday was to meet Maya Turner, the starting kicker and only woman on the University of Manitoba Bison's men's football team.
Oh my God, you were amazing!
On Saturday, her wish came true.
Crazy, huh? Yeah, I do admire you. Like, I was watching your video and I was just like, I want to meet this girl. And I want to do the same as you do. It is really like a man world, but I think we can take our place in that.
Turner has already done that.
And it is good, no doubt about it. Maya Turner from 21 yards out.
Last year, she was the first woman to play and score in a regular season U Sports football game. She made 2 field goals, including the game winner in overtime.
The Manitoba Bisons have won this homecoming football game on the strength of Maya Turner.
She instantly became a role model for other young women like Beauregard, who is also breaking ground as a rookie kicker on the Sherbrooke Cégep men's football team, the first woman in the league.
Like, she kicked like asses on the field, and now I can talk with her and she can give me some advice, and so I think like a lot of girls saw her and was like, holy shit, she can do it, I can do it too. Yeah, I'm so humbled that she like looks up to me and wanted to come out and see me play. I love to see other girls kicking footballs and playing on men's teams.
All the way from Quebec, coming to watch the Bisons play.
There was initially some doubt about having a female kicker on the Bisons, but that has disappeared.
It was very impressive, but it was very nice to see you win, because it was very sketchy and I was very, very pissing on myself. So.
They've embraced Turner and they welcomed Beauregard too.
Beauregard and her father flew back to Winnipeg with the team. On Sunday, they got a tour of the University of Manitoba campus and the football complex.
Welcome to the locker room.
As the only woman on the team, Turner has her own changing room.
Yep, this is where I hang out.
But her coach, Brian Doby, says she's just one of the guys.
Her story has resonated across the country.
After 29 years on the job, Doby is retiring this season. He's accomplished a lot, but says few things compare to this experience.
It's so symbolic of what anybody can do, regardless of race, gender, etc. Anybody leading the way and taking a risk.
As for Turner, she's thrilled her accomplishment is inspiring other women who dream of kicking down barriers. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Oh, nice!
It's a harvest one season in the making. Every fall for nearly a decade, people in Poplar River First Nation in eastern Manitoba have been reaping the rewards at no cost. A tub full of corn on the cob, among the vegetables grown and then delivered straight to people's homes by this father-son duo.
It's an unbelievable feeling to be able to work with your son, I think.
Kelly Hindmarch and his son Julius put locally grown food on tables in the Fly-In First Nation. Kelly's father taught him how to grow vegetables. Now he's passing on those skills to his son.
Yeah, and I'm probably the youngest gardener in Poplar River.
Together, they help maintain more than 30 home gardens located in people's yards. Some people here even grow grapes. Kelly and Julius also take care of the community garden. They both find helping the community healing.
I don't mind it. It keeps me away from bad habits.
While a federal subsidy helps keep costs down for fresh food sold at the Northern Store, the garden gives people another option. They grow pumpkins, potatoes, tomatoes, onions, carrots, cucumbers, and a local favorite, green beans.
Lots of people like beans around here. Go with their moose, that's why.
It's all part of Poplar River's Lands program. Chief Vera Mitchell says it makes a difference for people in the community.
People have little gardens that they plant stuff, but this communal garden has been beneficial. We pull our funding together so that he can do it full time.
Along with the vegetables, the community garden itself is also growing, with expansion plans in the works to make it even bigger for next growing season.
The community garden right now is about 1 acre, and we're in the works of increasing the size to 3 acres.
They're also hoping to add 2 temperature-controlled greenhouses to grow even more vegetables. Poplar River is also opening a butcher shop in this building where people will be able to get wild meat and fish.
The meat shop will be running through the fall and part of the winter.
Food from outside the First Nation comes in on the winter road, by boat, and by plane. Julius says gardens help cultivate a culture of healthy eating and food security.
I would think it's pretty good if younger generations get involved in gardening because of climate change and global change around the world right now.
He worries that could make it more difficult and more expensive to get food to his remote community, which is why he says sowing the seeds for a more sustainable future is so important. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Poplar River First Nation.
I'm Shanley Vidal with CBC Manitoba. The Eaton's retail chain may be long gone, but those memories live on in the Winnipeg home of a former employee. I paid a visit to Corey Quintain to see his growing collection of Eaton's memorabilia.
I used to work for Eaton's from 1995 to 99, and I was always a big fan of the store growing up, and now I have a growing collection of Eaton's memorabilia here in my condo here in Winnipeg. These are ceiling tiles from the downtown Winnipeg store. And when people often see them, they say, oh, you did such an interesting job painting them and a great finish. But this is the way they came out of the store, with the paint flaking off the patina like that. So this is how they looked when they were on the ceiling of the downtown Winnipeg store. Eaton's logo that everyone knows and remembers. These went above the doors of most of the exterior entrances of the store. If you went to Eaton's, you probably recognize this from your trips back then. This is from the downtown Winnipeg store, but pretty much every single Eaton's location had these in between the top and bottom panes of glass on their doors. This is mostly what I bought in that big box of things when the store was going out of business, a box of flyers and catalogs from the 70s and 80s. This is one of the most interesting pieces for me personally in the collection. This is the Globe and Mail Report on Business from August 27th, 1999. And you can see there's a young lad here that's holding a store closing sign, running through the store. You can see even the background of the picture is blurry because this young lad is running so fast and so dedicated, and that young lad is me. Most of these came through either, purchasing them from somewhere or being gifted them from somewhere. Most of the stuff that I came into myself was from the 80s and 90s and up. We've got these ones, which were kind of the 80s, 90s, which most people remember, especially people, that are in their 40s and 50s now. But then, of course, we have this one up here, which is from, I think, the 60s and 70s. And this star formation was pretty iconic. When you saw this on the box, back in those days, you knew you were getting something special. In this case, probably a hat. He is the official mascot of Eaton's Toyland. He has his own record, the Pumpkinhead story on one side, and then the Pumpkinhead song on the other, of course. And you would always get a storybook when you went to see Santa at Eaton's back in the, in the mid 1900s and the 50s. All right, so there's a few books here in the library as well. Some of them are newer, kind of the history of Eaton's. This one is really interesting because you realize the date. This is for the 50th anniversary of Eaton's, the Golden Jubilee, which happened in 1919. The big downtown stores especially hold a lot of memories for people. I know every time I go to Canada Life Centre, I still rub Timothy's toe on the way by for good luck. If True North wants, a new home for that statue, I think I might have a spot for it.
Meanwhile, Corey Quintain will be looking for one special piece to add to his collection, a 25th anniversary watch. For CBC Manitoba, I'm Shanley Vidal.
Cricket players are soaking up every second of nice weather before winter hits at tournaments like these. And soon, they'll have more places to play in Winnipeg. A new adult-sized pitch is opening in Bridgewater Lakes Park, and one for kids at Chancellor Park.
Players all over the city, they're playing in baseball diamonds, soccer grounds, or even sometimes, on walkways as well.
The Manitoba Cricket Association has more than 60 regulated teams and more than 2,000 players. Thousands more play recreationally, but there's not enough room for everyone.
We were approached by 8 to 10 new teams who wants to be part of the league, but we have to refuse them because we don't have cricket grounds.
Parmjeet Shahi says there are 9 pitches in the province, so players travel to places like Brandon and Winkler to play, a small trade-off for the love of the game.
This year we had to go many times just because Cinnamon Park is under construction, so I hope we're gonna get more cricket grounds next year.
The association also wants to work with the city of Winnipeg on booking times. Shahi says matches usually can't start until around 10 a.m., but because of city rules, they have to book time slots starting earlier in the day, meaning they're paying for time they're not actually using.
Usually our games are from anywhere from 5 to 6 hours a day. So we are looking into a policy where we can fit the games and pay fairly to City of Winnipeg, because we also want to pay so that they can maintain the grounds.
The Manitoba Cricket Association has big goals for the future too. They're hoping to one day have a total of 15 or 16 pitches here in the city. Gavin Axelrod, CBC News, Winnipeg. Yeah, just tell me about what happened this morning when you took your dogs for a walk.
I took the dogs out this morning to their normal little routine, and there was already someone with the dog out and not going past the corner of the building. So I stuck my head out, and I could see a gentleman on the ground, and I knew that they were covering the air conditioners. There was a ladder on the ground. He was on the ground. One of the workers was beside him, and then because it's so close to the fire hall, the fire truck rolled, but there was already firemen beside him.
What do you make? What goes through your head when you see something like that happening when you walk out of your apartment?
It's awful because you hear about accidents, but when you see someone on the ground so close, it's kind of sad. And these guys they're fairly young workers. I chatted to two of them last week because they started on Friday to cover the ACs. So it's unfortunate.
And so when you hear that one person was taken to hospital in stable condition and one person was taken in critical condition, what sort of runs through your mind?
You can never be too careful. Critical, I imagine, because these are high power, I imagine he would be burnt, severe burns. If he's alive, that's great, but it's very unfortunate. You start off a nice day like this to go to work and this happens. And it happened fairly early. I think it was before 9. So it's unfortunate.
You wouldn't believe that Phoenix and Snickers met just over a week ago by looking at this video. Even more unbelievable, Phoenix started nursing Snickers, a kitten just weeks old, days after they met.
This is Phoenix and Snickers. Snickers just came back from hiding from me, and she is just going back to nursing.
Patricia Chonin is the founder of Crazy Jumpers Dog School and Boarding. She has 7 dogs and 3 cats in her care. Chonin has been fostering 11-month-old Phoenix since December last year. 10 days ago, she rescued Snickers from her backyard. Phoenix taking on a motherly role wasn't something she imagined happening.
It's the first thing that Phoenix is going to do to check where her kitten is, and then she's laying in that corner, and the kitten starts nursing right away. Where did your kitten go?
Phoenix has never been pregnant. Veterinarian Dr. Jonas Watson says that makes the situation even more uncommon.
It's not unheard of to see dogs nurse kittens and potentially the other way around, but it's certainly unusual to have a case of a kitten being nursed by a non-pregnant dog.
He says Phoenix may be experiencing a pseudo or false pregnancy.
And this dog, who is probably undergoing the hormonal changes associated with pseudo-pregnancy, is looking for a small creature like a kitten to mother. So it's kind of kismet that the two of them met each other.
Watson says false pregnancies like these last 2 to 3 weeks. So while Snickers is getting the nutrients he needs now, soon he will need food from somewhere else. Felicia Adam, CBC News, Winnipeg.
So the camera's right here. And it's nice because I can angle it side to side or up or down.
These security cameras give Krista Friesen another set of eyes.
Gives you some peace of mind, doesn't it?
It sure does.
The Steinbach mother wanted cameras for a while, but then the government promised a rebate of up to $300. It was the motivation she needed.
You always want to know that your home is protected, your kid is protected, and that you're safe in your own home.
Friesen applied for the rebate in July, yet she hasn't gotten any money, and neither has most people. Of the $2 million worth of rebates the province is giving out, just over $300,000 has been distributed. That's only around 15%.
At this point, we didn't even know they were still processing.
Over in Warren, Kayla Oliver heard nothing about the status of her application, so she called and emailed the province, but nobody responded.
Give everybody a general update saying, hey, we're behind, we apologize, it's going to take 4 to 6 months, or, something.
The rebate program launched in June, and within days, $500,000 was spoken for. In August, $1.5 million was added to the budget, and within a week, they stopped accepting applications. The Justice Minister admits they've been overwhelmed. They've added around 12 people to process applications.
Right now, I can tell you that we're seeing an increased momentum in getting these funds out the door.
Back in Warren, Oliver says she understands if government is swamped. She just wants to know what's going on.
I understand the initiative, and I'm glad that, they took, security and stuff seriously. I'm disappointed in the lack of communication.
Rebate or not, she's feeling a lot safer. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Warren.
Alicia Wallen and Jason Podolaniuk have nearly ended up homeless again. The couple was living here at 583 Furby Street in Winnipeg. But that changed when a new owner took over in August. They say first, their hydro and water were shut off. Then,
a couple days before the end of the month, the owner said, "I'll give you $1,000 if you move."
Podolaniuk says he took the payout, but Wallen didn't.
I just didn't want to go anywhere. I thought they were going to just let me stay there, but they didn't let me stay.
They are clients of St. Boniface Street Links. The outreach organization helped them with their lease in 2022. Before that, the couple had spent years living in homeless encampments. The Furby block was recently sold to a company directed by Kelly Vassis. According to his spokesperson, Mark Eager, after taking possession of the property, the landlord was required to address an unsafe, unhealthy, overcrowded situation. Eager gave pictures to CBC, showing broken windows and fire hazards. He says there wasn't any hydro or water in the suites. Podolaniuk says after getting his payout,
They gave me till like 7 in the morning to move my stuff. I didn't have enough time to move all my stuff, so they just threw it out. Everybody lost all their stuff. They just threw it out over the balcony.
the spokesperson says Vassis tried to find safe alternate homes for tenants. Wallen says they gave her a place to stay. She says the bathtub and fridge didn't work and the floors were collapsing.
Yeah, I just feel like I can't trust anybody anymore.
Vassis is the same landlord as 285 College Avenue. The province alleges he illegally evicted dozens of tenants there in July. Manitoba's Minister of Consumer Protection says the evictions at 583 Furby were illegal.
RTB went out of the way to take proactive steps to make sure that tenants were not treated in the way that they had been treated on College Street, and to make sure that no laws got broken by the landlord.
The province says some of the people at the Furby building were not authorized tenants, and others were behind on their rent and utilities. They say at the end of August, nearly everyone was out of here. And that's when Manitoba Public Health gave the landlord a health hazard order to restore hydro, water, locks, and windows. And then by early September, the department deemed most of the suites here were unlivable.
So at the end of the day, it was public health that shut the building down.
In the meantime, this couple says they've lost nearly everything, despite having leases that were covered by employment and income assistance. They're wondering why the province didn't make sure they had somewhere safe to go.
It's terrifying almost. Like, terrifying to think you have to go back to living on encampment, and then winter's coming.
They're picking up the pieces, hopeful they can find a place to stay this winter indoors. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The city of Winnipeg successfully defended itself against a lawsuit from a former contractor. The judge in that case just awarded $100,000 in costs to the very same contractor, even though he failed to win the suit. This case goes back to 2017, when the city banned the contractor, claiming he lied, trespassed on city property, and stole equipment. The contractor sued the city for loss of income, and in a decision handed down in April, Manitoba Court of King's Bench Justice Chris Martin said the contractor failed to prove city officials engaged in misfeasance, breached a duty to be fair, or caused a loss by doing anything unlawful. But Justice Martin did not vindicate the city. The judge said the contractor proved there was no basis for the claims made about the contractor, who CBC is not naming, in order to protect his reputation from further harm. Martin said he proved he should not have been banned and he suffered an economic loss. In a decision issued Friday, Justice Martin awarded the contractor $100,000 because of a series of special circumstances, including the city gave him no choice but to sue, prolonged the legal proceedings once they started, and then reneged on a position it would lift the ban on the worker after judgment was handed down. Martin said the city acted shabbily and engaged in misconduct deserving of rebuke. Justice Martin also said he's not aware of a Manitoba precedent for awarding costs to a losing party. The city says it's reviewing the decision. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
42-year-old Rebecca Marina Flett is behind bars after pleading guilty to manslaughter in the death of Phelan Johnston. The attack happened in the Winnipeg core area in June of 2023. Johnston was experiencing homelessness at the time. She was repeatedly attacked by Flett, which led to her death. In his decision, Provincial Court Judge Dale Harvey said, Flett approached Ms. Johnston from behind and struck her numerous times about the head and body. One person from a group of several individuals standing by intervened to break up the incident. Johnston was living in Salvation Army's Center of Hope at the time of her death. CBC spoke with the 28-year-old in her room there a year before she died. Johnston said she had plans to move into her own place and go back to school for social work. Court heard on the night of the attack, Flett went after Johnston 2 more times, repeatedly punching her in the face. This blow was delivered with enough force to cause her to fall backward where the left side of her head struck the curb of the sidewalk. This effectively was the fatal blow, Harvey said. Johnston was eventually taken back to her room in Salvation Army, but refused help from paramedics. Court heard she was found dead in her room the next morning. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Flett pled guilty to manslaughter 2 weeks ago. Harvey said, the sentence cannot repair the harm done to the victim or her family. What Ms. Flett has done cannot be undone, either by her or through this sentence imposed. Glad-do factors were taken into consideration during the sentencing. Court heard Flett grew up in the foster care system and was the victim of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. Ultimately, she was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Mike Arsenault, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Winnipeg firefighters have struggled to keep up with the number of vacant building fires. Last year, the city started billing for the cost of sending crews to battle the blazes. But now the fire department says those fees may have done more harm than good. Last year, the city issued a total of $1.15 million worth of fees for fires in vacant buildings. So far, they've collected nearly $78,500. In some cases, the high fees may have discouraged property owners from making repairs, leading to repeat fires. City staff recommend lowering the fees in the hope more owners will pay up. Mayor Scott Gillingham says he's open to changes.
The goal is to get the result we need, and the result we need is fewer vacant and derelict properties, and those properties turned into developed properties.
The city assesses fees based on the number of fire trucks and other equipment responding. The average fee per property is $26,000, with the highest bill for $138,000. The city recommends a new set of fees, starting at $5,000 for the first fire, up to $20,000 for the fourth and subsequent fires. The William White neighborhood has some of the highest numbers of vacant building fires. Neighborhood Association President Darrell Warren doesn't support lowering the fees.
To the people in the neighborhood, they would probably see the city as being weak. And what I mean by that is the city being weak is they're backing down from these guys.
The city would also write off about $900,000 worth of fees issued last year. The service stopped issuing new fees in December after hearing complaints from property owners. Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Chief Christian Schmidt says in some cases, owners were in the midst of making repairs when a repeat fire occurred.
We need to be cognizant of that, and we don't want to be contributing to some of the problems. We want to be helping to resolve some of the issues in the city.
The city also recommends introducing a new process to waive fees for property owners in some circumstances. The Executive Policy Committee will debate the proposed changes next week. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 12-year-old girl felt threatened by a man swinging a machete here on Saturday night. She was with a group of friends waiting for a ride home by Rossbrook House. It's an inner-city drop-in located right across the street. I spoke with the program manager at Rossbrook House, and she says the young girl was visibly shaken and shocked.
The day it happened, she was very scared and shaking and crying. Thankfully, our staff and her friends were there to surround her and support her.
The group ran to the center for help. They called the police, and not long after, a man 18 years old was arrested for assault with a weapon.
And the kids, because they are quite regulars, they know that if anything were to happen, they can run here. And we will do our best to take care of them the best way we can.
This is one of 4 cases reported by police in the past 2 days that involves a machete or a knife. Constable Claude Chansey with the Winnipeg Police Service says violent crime has gone up in the past 5 years.
There has been an increase of a little over 5% with incidents involving sharp-edged weapons. Again, that includes knives and machetes. However, we have seen that in the year to date, from January to September, there's actually been a decrease from last year of a little over 11%.
The Winnipeg Police is looking forward to the Manitoba government's introduction of a new law. The province is looking to tighten its restrictions on sales of machetes, knives, and long-bladed weapons. Felicia Adam, CBC News, Winnipeg.
52-year-old Travis McLeod stared at the ground while he waited to be sentenced for the murders of his common-law partner and their 2 young children. On April 10, 2022, McLeod murdered 32-year-old Chantel Murphy, their 6-year-old daughter Isabella Murphy, and their 3-year-old son Mason Murphy. During the sentencing, Crown Attorney Dana Kweyaguzzi revisited the events of that night. On April 10th at 10:40 a.m., Mr. McLeod found a large metal bar, went upstairs to his children's bedroom where they slept, and viciously bludgeoned them. When Chantel awoke to the commotion, he turned his attention to her and attacked her with the same metal bar. After the murders, McLeod set the house on fire. Court heard McLeod had a history of addiction and violence. He had 4 domestic assaults on his record dating back to 1999 and had been hospitalized for mental health issues in the past. The family of the victims wiped away tears as they waited for the sentence to be handed down. Court heard impact statements from Tammy St. Jean and Patrick Murphy, the parents and grandparents of the 3 deceased. I will never get the opportunity to hug and hold my daughter or grandchildren, hear their laughter, see them smile, or get the opportunity to celebrate all of life's milestones with them. They had so much to look forward to. It's always been my belief and my experience that a father's job is to love and protect his family from the dangers of the world. I will never understand how you, Travis, went from being a father that should have protected his family to being the monstrous thing that they needed protection from. In court, McLeod showed remorse for his crimes, saying, "I would like to apologize for my actions that ended the lives of 3 people I loved very much. There isn't a day I don't think of them, and I wish I could go back and had gotten help." Court of King's Bench Justice Chris Martin called this case one of the worst he's dealt with in his 16 years on the bench. He sentenced McLeod to life in prison with no parole eligibility for 16 years. Mike Arsenault, CBC News, Winnipeg.
There's more here. This is what was here last night.
Raina Badowski shovels used needles from the front door of her dance studio. She says sharps lying on the ground have been a growing issue in her community of Swan River.
I think it's really sad. I don't think that is, kids have enough to worry about, never mind having to worry about needles in the place where they're supposed to be coming to dance school.
Mayor Lance Jacobson says more than 500,000 needles have been handed out in the past year by organizations like Prairie Mountain Health and Manitoba Harm Reduction.
It's not working. It's costing the taxpayers a lot of money, and I don't even mean in the healthcare or needle distribution. I'm talking about people in the communities and how much it costs us. If it's cleanup or even the crimes that come along with that. And
Bylaw Officer Derek Peguis says he gets a lot of complaints about needles found in parks, in playgrounds, and on the sidewalk. He says it has a lot of people worried about safety in the community.
Cupfuls of them, sharps laying around everywhere with like the pokey ends sticking up, stuff like that. It's just ridiculous that everybody's safety is at risk.
Swan River recently passed a resolution limiting how syringes are handed out and cleaned up. Swan Valley West has also created a similar bylaw. Manitoba Harm Reduction says they've started steps to limit needle garbage.
We are actually just going to be launching a program where we provide people with small, discrete needle disposal containers, particularly those who are using substances publicly.
Swan River resident Adam Maksuta says something needs to happen fast because people are scared. He recently found more than 100 used sharps by his church.
Public safety has to be looked at. Secondly, the distribution of needles and the disposal of the needles. Thirdly, people have to start having some respect for other people's property.
Meanwhile, Prairie Mountain Health and Manitoba Harm Reduction say they'll continue to hand out harm reduction supplies to those who seek them. Chelsea Kemp, CBC News, Swan River. Andrea Shappy is getting her blood pressure checked. She's in a mobile clinic parked right by her office in her Birchwood Sioux First Nation, almost 2 hours northwest of Brandon. Shappy says having a nurse come to her saves her time and cuts down on stress.
The ERs they're not always open, so we have to I've gone as far as Brandon sometimes with one of my kids, so. And then you sit in the ER because it's not like emergent, right? So you sit there for about 5 or 6 hours waiting for care. Sometimes we give up and come home.
Shappy says her family uses the clinic all the time. They can get checkups, diagnostic tests, immunization, referrals, and baby care near their home. The mobile clinic is celebrating its 10-year anniversary. Community nurse Tanya Douglas has been part of the crew for almost the entire time.
We really just see almost anything. We were initially set up to be a primary care, so see people for their regular chronic issues and stuff, which we certainly do, but we do see a lot of kind of acute presentations and really any age range.
The mobile clinic can see around 25 patients a day. Often, the weekly visits are the only form of primary care they can get in their community.
It just fills that gap. And in doing so, we try to prevent more severe illness.
The community nurse at Birchwood Health Center says there's not a doctor or nurse practitioner on site. The center is also short 2 nurses, so the mobile health clinic steps up and provides some aid.
It helps me by just not having to send people away from the community.
The retrofitted RV travels to Birdtail every Monday and visits 3 other First Nation communities every week. Chelsea Kemp, CBC News, Birdtail Sioux First Nation.
If you haven't snowmobiled before, this is kind of the top level of snowmobiling.
This Lactabani showroom wouldn't be here if local politicians hadn't set aside their differences and started working together.
It's been beyond overwhelming and incredible.
All right, have a good one. Bye.
The dealership opened in February and says it's done brisk business ever since, but first it had to clear some hurdles.
We're actually on the RM side of Lactabani, on RM land. And that across the street, across the main highway into town, is town.
The issue? The town of Lactabani has water and sewer services. The rural municipality does not, and the business couldn't start up without it.
It put the town and the RM in a place where they had to work together.
The town's revamped water treatment plant opened in 2004 with help from the province. It was also meant to serve the surrounding area. 20 years later, that still hasn't happened. People in the RM have been living with boil water advisories and trucking in water for decades.
There was much less of a collaborative approach in respect to what we need to do to support and strengthen our community. And that's changed recently.
After years of rivalry and arguments over funding, the 2 governments are finally planning to run lines into the RM, bringing people clean water while bringing the town more revenue.
We recognize that, running our water plant at less than 20% capacity is probably not really particularly efficient.
The lack of water not only made life harder, it also stalled growth on both sides of the municipal border.
We need the town needs us.
Both governments say their long-standing disagreements led to stagnation.
There are some perceptions that, yes, there were personality conflicts.
Has that been holding Lactabani back then?
Yes. We've missed a lot of opportunities over the years because we haven't had the water and sewer infrastructure.
This RM councillor spearheaded a shared community development corporation in 2018 and says it fell apart due to differences in vision. Now, the RM and town are proudly partnering to build water lines and attract developers.
It's over the top exciting for me. It's a very, very positive thing for our region, for us to be moving in this direction. And it's long overdue.
The new alliance is already reaping rewards at Lake Life Power Sports.
Absolutely. We believe in the town, and we think that any further investment in it, there needs to be more.
The councils hope to get more pipes in the ground next year. Emily Brass, CBC News, Lactabani, Manitoba.
That's awesome.
A moment of freedom.
But the exoneration of Clarence Woodhouse, Alan Woodhouse, and Brian Anderson has raised a crucial question. Who killed Ting Fong Chan? He was a chef at Winnipeg's Beachcomber restaurant in 1973 and a father of 2. Lawyer James Lockyer advocates for the wrongfully convicted with Innocence Canada. He says it can be difficult to find the real killer after so long.
To say the trail is cold is it doesn't quite get to it.
He points to the case of David Milgaard. He was exonerated after DNA evidence identified the true culprit nearly 30 years later.
James Lockyer thinks it's unlikely there's DNA evidence in Chan's murder, but he says police do have something else: the names of other people identified as suspects at the time.
Because any other suspects that they identified back in 1973, they discounted because they had decided who had done the crime.
Retired Detective Andrew Mikołajewski saw that when he reviewed the 1981 killing of 16-year-old Barbara Stoppel, after Thomas Sofino was wrongfully convicted. There were missing notes and even evidence.
And that may be some of the disappointment that investigators in this case find.
It's been over 50 years since Chan was killed, so whoever did it could be dead. Lockyer says it's still worth trying to find who's responsible.
There's a societal interest in it too. And there's nothing Brian Anderson, Alan Woodhouse, and Clarence Woodhouse would like more.
Lockyer says Chan's family deserves to know too. Winnipeg police are reviewing the case but declined to comment. Caitlin Gowerluck, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Andrew Marquis is best known as a developer of the Parker lands in Winnipeg. Between 2020 and 2023, he worked as a consultant and advisor for Peguis First Nation, working on a debt repayment plan, consulting on housing shortages related to flooding, and using treaty land entitlement funds to purchase real estate assets. In a statement of claim filed on September 27th, Peguis alleges Marquis, companies he controls, and a company owned by his wife failed to act in the best interests of the band and benefited financially from breaches of duty. In the claim, Peguis alleges Marquis has consistently misused his power and discretion as a fiduciary to enrich himself to the detriment of Peguis. According to the claim, Marquis had the Peguis First Nation Real Estate Trust purchase this former golf course in East St. Paul because he was interested in developing it into housing, according to the claim. Peguis claims Marquis directed the real estate trust to agree to a $5.5 million loan from a company owned by Marquis's wife. That loan now has an interest rate of